Anderson. I live over on West Alford Road, and I've been curating this program since the beginning, and that's why the three subjects that are very close to my heart and interest, beavers, birds, and bears. This is the last program of the season, but we'll start again in the fall and probably do maybe a plant focus, maybe some fungi, but we'll see. And so thank you all for coming. This is really fantastic. I'm really excited to have Thea here, and her students even more so, because the next generation of conservation and wildlife management is right here in our room. So.
All right, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to all of you, so thank you for inviting us. We're going to talk to you a little bit about bears in general and about our project in particular. So just to get us started, maybe, I'll get it back on. Yeah, there we go. Now we got it. Okay, so to get us started, to introduce ourselves, obviously I am Thea Kristensen. I'm from Amherst College. I've worked there for about 8 years now, and I am really fortunate to work with an incredible group of students, and I have 3 of them with me here today, the folks over here. So we have Ellen, who is from New Hampshire, Zaynah is from New York, and Marie is all the way from Arkansas. So they are all rising sophomores, so next year they will be sophomores, and they've been working with me this year, and we're doing a project this summer that they'll talk to you about in a little bit. All right, so as soon as we walked into the door, you all started sharing your bear photos with us. So we want to have a chance to share some photos with each other. So if you have photos on your phone that you're willing to share with the rest of the group, you can use this QR code to go drop some in a slide. It's totally fine if you don't want to, but we'll come back to the slide later so that we can check out everybody's bear photos to share with one another. So it's fun to get excited about wildlife together, right? So I'll move on here. So I, in preparation for this talk, went back and looked at some of my old work, and this is actually the big picture from my master's degree, so quite a few years ago now. During my master's degree, I was actually studying foraging ecology, so the patterns of behavior with respect to how animals choose food and choose to leave a patch to go to a new patch to get new food. And I worked with a lot of different animals during that time. But as you can see, one of those animals that I got to work with were grizzly bears. And they were so exciting. They were so much more interesting. They were the hardest ones to work with because they were so complicated, and so they would just utterly refuse to eat certain foods that I offered, but I found that kind of exciting. I was like, wow, this creature is really intelligent, it is thoughtful about what it's doing, it's making very different decisions than the other animals that I was working with, so things like antelope and caribou and things like that. And I also was really fortunate in this facility. They have this, it's like huge container of water like you have out for cows for water, right? But the bears play in it like little kids and roll the ball around to each other, and it was amazing. So I fell in love with bears at that point in time. So the other picture that is up there is from my Ph.D., the master's I did in Washington State, the Ph.D. I did in Arkansas. In Arkansas, I shifted my questions, and it was all about bears and not as much about how they were eating. I was thinking about how they were distributed across the landscape, how they were moving. That population was actually expanding, how they were related to each other, how many there were, all of those kinds of questions. And I was really lucky to work with the fish and wildlife folks there, and so this picture is actually from going out with them to do a den visit. In a lot of different states, folks with the fish and wildlife do actually go out in the wintertime to check on mother bears and their babies, and they will weigh the mother, weigh the babies, see how healthy they are, that sort of thing, and then they can go back in subsequent years and see how the babies are doing over time, which is really kind of exciting and helpful in terms of thinking about managing them. So, of course, having done a lot of work with bears in my lifetime, I wanted to come back and think about bears again when I got to Amherst. I started out doing a project in collaboration with some folks at UMass and our Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. And then as I was doing that, my students and I were talking about it, and we were saying, well, we got to get the community involved, right? Like, we want the community thinking about wildlife too. let's think about how we can do that. And then we also recognize that, it's only so much data that we can collect as individuals. How can we collect more data? Because the more data you have, the better picture you get of what is actually happening, right? So because of that, we decided to start our program. So it's called a participatory or a citizen science project because it involves members of the community participating in the science. So we have the two websites, the MassMammals and MassBears, and we'll give you QR codes for those later if you want to check those out. But the idea is that we collaborate with the community, right? So we are working with the community is collecting data with us about the wildlife that is there. We want to ask questions together about what's happening with our wildlife and how we coexist with that wildlife. We also work to do some educational outreach, right? So we want to teach people about wildlife and how we can peacefully coexist. And of course, we also want to have inclusive practice. So we want to make sure that we are inviting everybody in so that everybody feels welcome in doing science with us. So I mentioned that we started out, it was a small group of students. So that was in 2019 that we were brainstorming and building our websites and just getting going. I had 4 students at that point in time. This is our team from this past year. Obviously, you can see that we grew even as our team at Amherst, and then clearly within the community, we've been able to grow quite a bit as well. So that has been exciting to be able to see how much our project has grown over time, and I am so privileged to get to work with this amazing group of students. So as part of this project, you already heard me mention a little bit about the data collection. And so we have members of the community contributing sightings of local wildlife. So bears, bobcats, foxes, coyotes, moose, all sorts of different kinds of wildlife. They'll tell us about when they saw it, where they saw it, and then we can start to do stuff with that data. Another really helpful way for folks to give us data, so if any of you all have trail cameras or even a security camera that's in a fixed location, it's actually really helpful for us to be able to get data over time. And so those kinds of volunteers, we set up a folder for them, and then they can just drop their pictures in that folder like once a month or so. So then that is very, very helpful for us in terms of thinking about how to answer questions about wildlife. So you're going to see this slide a number of times throughout the presentation because this slide allows you to understand a little bit about the different facets of our project, and it'll help ground us in terms of thinking about which direction we're going to be talking about at any point in the talk. So our project has a lot of different facets, as you can see. Obviously, I've already mentioned how important it is to collaborate with our community and to have volunteer contributions. We also do educational outreach, so you can see our picture of our kids that we work with in our local community. We also do community outreach, so like today, coming and chatting with all of you about what you think about wildlife. And then, of course, we do the research aspect of our project. So we know that the advertisement was to come and learn about bears, and so I am going to talk to you a little bit more about bears for a bit, and then we'll switch over and talk about our project. So my students will come up and share with you a little bit about the different facets of the project after I share with you a little bit about bears, and Massachusetts bears in particular. So there are 8 species of bears in the world. We have 3 of the species in North America, our American black bear, the brown bear, and the polar bear. The one you're all familiar with here in Massachusetts are the black bears. This shows you the range of black bears in North America. And we know that black bears are associated with forest habitat, and so it makes a lot of sense in some terms of some of the aspects of the distribution, and that you wouldn't expect to see them in the Great Plains, for instance, right? So why bears? Why did we get started with bears? Why were we so excited about bears? Well, I'm guessing you could all answer that question yourselves probably because you're here and excited to learn about bears. However, there are some really important reasons why we might choose bears as a starting point. You heard why I personally got excited about bears, but people have really strong opinions about bears. They really are passionate about them in one way or another, and that can influence how we think about conserving them or managing their populations. And they actually need a lot of area in which to exist. And so if we're thinking about setting aside space to be able to allow bears to exist, that can also help other species. So not even just wildlife, but also the plants or the fungus or whatever else is occurring in that area. So lots of valuable reasons to be thinking about bears. So when I tell people that I study bears, I often get one of a few different responses. So my favorite, which I'm sure that I will get here today, is, oh, I saw a bear in my backyard, or I saw a bear when I was out hiking, and they'll tell me all their stories, and we can enjoy telling these stories with each other, which is really exciting. Some people, unfortunately, though, are scared of bears, and I will reassure you about that later, that we don't need to be scared of bears. We can totally coexist with them. It's okay. And then there are folks who hunt bears, and they'll tell me about the bears that they hunted. So lots of different responses that I'll get from folks, and lots of very strong opinions about them. And so we have to be thoughtful about that as we're thinking about how to coexist with bears, how to manage bears, and all of those things. So I put a picture of Dave Waddles up here because he is our state bear biologist, and he does an incredible job working throughout the state of Massachusetts on managing black bears. And so I wanted to make sure to acknowledge all the hard work that he does with all of the other biologists throughout the state in terms of taking care of bears here. I'm just going to grab a drink of water. I'm sorry, I've got allergies, so I might have to take a few sips of water. But so black bears have a history in Massachusetts, right? So way back when, before European colonizers got here, there were lots of black bears in Massachusetts. They were everywhere. But then things changed, right? So we had Europeans come on over to the area, and they were interested in cutting down forests in order to make space for homes, and then to be able to have agriculture so that they could grow food. At that same time, people would also hunt for bears, and they would use them for meat or fur, or oil is actually an interesting thing that they would use as part of that. And so because of these factors, we saw the numbers of bears really declining, and bears getting pushed further and further west in Massachusetts. So in the 1970s, Cardoza, who I cite over here, did a degree at UMass. And as part of his thesis, he was looking at black bear history in Massachusetts and trying to learn a little bit more about it. And so he asked people at that time, like, where people were actually observing bears. And you can see that the places that are highlighted in black are the only places that they had bears at that point in time. So not really that long ago, right, historically speaking, we had very, very few bears in Massachusetts, like down to about 80 individuals, they think, at that point in time. So really, really small numbers of bears. So luckily, things changed again, right? Always changing. So as we know, people started moving west, right? And the agriculture shifted farther out west. We found rich soils in different parts of North America, and so folks started moving in that direction. And so then over time, we saw changes in the habitat that was available for the black bears. So you don't need to pay attention to all the tiny writing in these two maps, but if you look at the dark spots, those are the forested areas. So this one is from the 1800s, so 1830s, right? And you don't see anywhere near as much of that black area as we see in the one that was from 1999. So we actually saw quite a bit of area becoming reforested. So really incredible changes that we saw in our state. And probably all of you know this, right? Because you wander around in the forest around here and you are constantly going to be bumping into the stone walls, right? So people had those stone walls up to partition their property and to grow their crops. And now we're in the middle of a forest encountering those. So we can see that history for ourselves as we walk around. Another change that happened is that we had harvest practices change. So people don't hunt bears as often for meat the way that they used to. We don't use them for oil in that way. And we have specific restrictions in place about how and when people can hunt bears. So with all of those changes happening in Massachusetts, we got to see a resurgence of black bears. And so there are quite a bit more black bears than there were in the 1970s. So over time, we've seen those numbers increasing. One of the first marks of changes in the bear population was when they crossed over the Connecticut River, right? And so that we had them isolated to this, like out here, like way western part of the state. And then they started moving east, and then they crossed the river, and now they're moving farther east and farther east. And so this map is from the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife from 2019, but even looking at this, we know they've gone farther east than that. So yeah, I mean, they're getting close to Boston. You're absolutely right. And so we're seeing articles like these where people are like, oh my gosh, there's bears here. Like, what do we do, right? You all are probably used to coexisting with bears. You live with them. You're used to coexisting with them. But it is really disconcerting for the folks out east who are like, oh my gosh, there's a bear. Like, what do I do? They're not comfortable with it because they're just not used to it. And so we need to be thoughtful, again, about how we're talking to people, how we're sharing information with them, and help them learn how to avoid negative interactions with the bears. So you all may well be aware of all of these strategies already, but I'm going to share them regardless, and that there's simple things that we can do to help prevent any negative interactions with bears. It is typically our actions that are causing those negative interactions with the bears. So if we can make some simple changes, then that will really help. So one simple thing we can all do is store our garbage inside until the morning of garbage day. I know they all, like, my garbage people try to tell me that I should put it out the night before. It's got to be out by this time of the morning. But we all know, I'm sure you've all seen this, when a bear goes down a street and everybody's got their garbage out the night before, and then the whole street is covered with garbage. Well, that bear now learned that it can get food when it comes to visit your street. So if you are able to keep your garbage inside until the morning that it's going to be picked up, that is a huge help, because then they're not learning that, ooh, this is a place where I can get good food. Storing pet food inside is also really helpful. I think a lot of us get tempted to stick it out on the porch. We don't really want it in our house, right? But then the bear is going to see that as a food resource and come to your house. So again, if you can store that well, then that will help prevent negative interactions. I already talked with some of you about folks who have bees and chickens, and the way to protect those is to have electric fencing. So the QR code here is for a Fish and Wildlife website where they talk to you about how to prevent negative interactions, and they have links to talk about how to build an electrical fence should you need one of those. The final one is a really hard one for those of us who love wildlife and that, like, we really enjoy checking out birds as well, but unfortunately the bird food is really high in fat. It is a wonderful food resource for bears, and then it's so easy for them. It's all concentrated in a perfect platter, right? We're giving them a feast. And so if we're able to not put the bird food out, again, we're separating ourselves from being a food resource for the bears. So I want to reassure you all in that bear attacks are quite rare. Again, I think probably this is not the audience that needs this message, but some folks are concerned about it, so I think it's always helpful to talk about it a little bit, and that they're actually even like significantly more rare than being hit by lightning, right? And we don't run around worried about getting hit by lightning on a regular basis. So it is not something that we need to be like super concerned about with bears. But I'm going to give you a couple of things to do to avoid, again, negative interactions with bears. So we often see bears coming through our yard, and that's fine. They're walking through, they're passing through, moving on to a new area. But if they're hanging out and spending time there, that's not necessarily something you want. Again, we don't want them to associate people with a place where they should be, right? So an easy way to deter them is like open the window up and bang some pots together, make a bunch of noise, use an air horn, and they don't like that, and they're going to end up leaving, and you'll be fine. And as I said earlier, obviously removing the food resources is a huge help as well. So a lot of us also like to spend time outside, right? We go hiking, we go walking, and we might encounter a bear in that situation. And so there are some things that we can do to avoid having any negative interaction in that way. So there's a famous bear biologist, Kate Kendall. I've talked to her in the past, and she frequently will tell people about, like, anytime I'm going outside, I'll just say, "Hey bear," as I'm walking along, right? So she's, "Hey bear," as she's walking, and that deters the bears from coming up to her. They don't want to bump into her either, right? So by making noise, she's letting them know that she's there and that they will avoid her. So I shared this with my students, and so, gosh, I think it was 2019, I had some students out doing a different kind of field work than they'll talk about, but they were going out to different sites to study bears, and they would sing. And so that was their strategy for letting the bears know that they're coming. They would just all sing together when they went out, and that was great. So, but sometimes we still are going to bump into bears when we're walking around. I was out, there's a path near my house, like by the railroad tracks. I was out with my dog one day, and I saw a bear up ahead on the trail and recognized, like, oh, this is not a thing that I want to be bringing my dog into. It's not a good idea. The bear didn't really pay any attention to us. In that situation, we were far enough away, I just backed up slowly, got myself out, and we waited a little while before going back down the trail to go back home. And we had no issues, right? Sometimes it helps for people when they're feeling like they're really close to a bear. Talk calmly, back yourself away, just don't run, right? So calmly, back yourself away, get out of the situation is generally going to work for you. So all of these strategies are likely to ameliorate the situation if you were to encounter a bear. Okay, so now I'm going to transition to talking about our research and what we've been doing around this. Okay, so we said our projects are MassMammals and MassBears, right? And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about MassBears here. And you recall the map that I showed you from Fish and Wildlife, where they were showing us how far the bears had gotten east. And then you can see our map since then. And these are sightings that have been shared by community members. And we have bears that went really far east, right? So they are definitely moving throughout the state. But we can't do this without all of you, right? Our community members who are sharing what you're seeing out here. And so our models are only as good as the data that we have. And so you all are the ones that are able to give us data that is representative of the area. And so you'll notice there's some areas out here where I know there are bears that we don't have sightings. So we got to keep spreading the word and letting people know. Just submit a quick sighting to MassBears if you have seen a bear, and then that will help us get better models so that we can understand what's happening with bears in the state. So you all get to help out with that. All right, so my students and I, of course, are doing research around this, right? So we're working with our community, we're gathering data together, and we're working to answer questions. So we were really lucky, and we just published an article, like this in the past couple weeks that it came out. And this one was looking at the establishment of our project. How did we get started? How did this work? And then what happened, because you'll notice I said we started in fall of 2019, right? It was when we were building our websites, and COVID hit right after that. And we were like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to our project? So I'll tell you. So this, again, you don't need to pay attention to quite the level of detail. I'll point out the piece that you need to know. So this is just the number of sightings reported by folks, and then this shows the proportion. And so we're interested in the one to the far right, which is the people who are continuing to give us more sightings, creating more data. And you'll notice there's this giant area. And those were people that heard about us through the newspaper. So we were most successful in spreading the word by getting news coverage. So thank you all for getting us in the news for this talk. We really appreciate that, because that likely helped get more people aware of our project. And hopefully we'll have more folks talking to us about bears. The second piece, again, you don't have to know the level of detail, but I'll point out the pieces that you need to know. What we were interested in is, right, that 2020, and that everybody was doing different things because COVID was going on. And so we were curious about how that influenced our data. And we can see that it did. So this is self-reported data, and then this is what we were able to calculate based on what we knew about the area where they were submitting data. And in both of these, the 2020, you can see that there were more sightings with a higher proportion of forest, and then we saw more of a shift to people's yards after 2020. And that totally makes sense, right? Because we couldn't go do the things that we were normally doing. We're stuck in our houses and feeling really desperate to get outside. And so we think that what's likely happened is that folks were going hiking more often. And so that is why we saw that difference in that year. So now we're on to our next step, right? We got that article published and we're working on some more ideas here. And so we want to now model black bear distribution, right? So we saw the older map from Department of Fish and Wildlife. We saw our map of just the sightings, and then we need to work with those sightings to actually come up with where they are really distributed. You heard me earlier say that black bears are associated with forest. So naturally, that's one of the first things that we looked at. And we can see that we do see an association between the number of sightings and the proportion of forest cover in an area. What we did find, though, that, and not surprisingly, the areas where bears are does not always correspond to the areas where our volunteers are. So, excuse me, we see a bit of a drop off here in our highest concentration of forest, which totally makes sense, right? We're not going to be in the deep woods to the same extent that the bears are. And so when we're making our models, we need to be thoughtful about that, right? So we have to be thoughtful both about where the bears are, but then where the people are who are giving us information about the bears. So I've had a student working on that for the past year, and we're now at that point of trying to resolve that one piece to tweak the model so that we can account for that difference of where the people are versus where the bears are. So a new student is going to start working on that in the fall. So then I will have more things to tell you probably a year from now. Okay, so now I'm going to get to turn it over to my students, and each of them is going to tell you a little bit more about our project. So Marie is going to start by telling you about our educational outreach part of our program.
Hi, so I'm Marie. I'm a part of the summer research, but I mainly focus on the educational outreach during the school year. So we have a few main goals whenever we go into the classroom. Most of the kids we're reaching out to come from really rural communities. And we know that kids from those places are less likely to pursue a scientific career in the future, and we want to help change that. So first, we want the kids to know that science is something that they can access, it's something that they can use. And to get them to understand that, we just want them to be more involved in scientific processes and to just understand what science even is. It's a really broad term. There's a lot of subcategories, different niches. I want kids to find something that they're excited about in science, and then they can pursue that. And then also we want the kids to understand that science is something they can use in their everyday life. Kids are really curious. They go out into the world, they ask questions, and we want them to be able to find those answers through science. So one thing we do is we provide classrooms with a trail camera, and we try to have the kids help set it up. Then throughout the school year, they get to check for photos, for videos of their local wildlife just in their backyard practically. We also get this data to use in our research, so the kids get to feel like they're a part of a bigger scientific project. Also, we provide a wide range of lesson plans that we're always updating, always making new ones. Most of the lesson plans focus on science in Massachusetts. So I got to work on 2 of them this semester. One of them was about food webs, so I got to use a lot of information I was learning through my classes at Amherst. And then create this food web that you would find in Massachusetts and go over the different parts of it with the kids, which is really fun. I also helped create one about land use in Massachusetts that Thea already talked about a little bit, how the land used to look whenever indigenous peoples were here, and then how it changed with the colonizers, and now with the reforestation, what we see. So we've been working on the education side for a little bit now. So some students actually published an article last summer about the impacts we're seeing in the classroom. And we got really positive results, which is pretty exciting. The teachers said that they could tell their kids were so much more engaged and involved in the science. They were really excited about the project. They were excited about being a part of the project themselves. And also, really importantly, we found that we were able to reach kids from all different backgrounds, no matter where they were in their science journey, how much they knew about science. We were able to get them excited about it.
What age group are you talking about?
Yeah, so we go into classrooms 5th to 12th grade, but we've also done programs with like toddlers and preschoolers and stuff like that. Yeah, great question. So teachers are really excited whenever we reach out to them about this project. They say the kids really get into it. They want to check the trail camera. They want to see the videos. They want to see the photos. They want to see what animals are walking around their school. So we're really grateful for that. We also go outside of the classroom with this outreach. These are 2 events that I got to participate in this semester. On the far left, we did a story hour in conjunction with a local library. The kids came to the Benesky Museum at Amherst College. We got to read them stories about wildlife, about mammals. The kids got to learn what different tracks the animals make, learn different animal noises. They got to do a fun activity where they walked like different animals. And then, yeah, lots of fun. And then they just got to go around the museum and check out all these really cool fossils that we have. And, they were so excited about that part. And then on the right, I got to go to a scout camp one weekend and stay there for the day and get to present to about 7 different groups of kids. Just talk to them about our project, talk to them about mammals in Massachusetts, show them skulls, show them rubber molds of the tracks. And that was really fun, especially whenever kids would come up to us afterwards and ask us more about our project and our research and how they can potentially get involved in stuff like that whenever they get older. We also have the Ella Caminantes Story Hour. This was actually an undergraduate at Amherst that really initialized this, where we translated all of our materials over to Spanish just to make it more accessible for more people. So we have another story hour whenever it's all in Spanish. We also got to go to a language fair because of this and promote MassMammals. Lastly, we also found that our project is having a really positive impact on us undergrads, which is exciting to see. Through our paper, we found that we also felt an increased engagement in science and just a better identity of ourselves as scientists. And we saw this because at the end of every year, we have a survey where we talk about how we're feeling about the project. And these are some themes that have emerged through that survey, and then we go into focus groups and may talk about it. So the 2 main themes that we see pop up is we just appreciate science more, how awesome it is, how many things you can use it for. And also we're more involved in science through this project. And also our collaboration with each other has improved, our teamwork skills, and just a sense of community, not just in Amherst College, but we really get to branch out to the surrounding communities by going to different towns and schools and meeting so many people that we wouldn't normally get the chance to meet. So now I'm going to pass it over to Zaynah. She's going to talk about our community outreach. Yeah?
You're the student from the South, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Do you have black bears where you come from? And if so, have you seen any, or do you know where they are?
I have never seen any black bears where I am from. No, it's not really common at all, I don't think. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So we're going to hold most of the questions to the end so we can finish talking, but there are definitely bears in Arkansas. I was in Arkansas and studied them there as well, but maybe not in the part of the state that Marie was in.
No. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Hi everyone, my name is Zaynah. I work on the data and outreach side of MassMammals as well as the summer research, which you'll hear about soon. but I'm here today to talk to you about community outreach and volunteer contributions. So we love our community. You all are a huge part of why we do what we do. Our ultimate goal is to work with our communities to answer your questions that you have about our wildlife. Why do they do what they do? But we can't really do that unless we expand our contact. We love to get involved with our community face to face, and we're working on doing that through farmers markets, expanding our social media, and working with libraries. So here I have a picture of some of our Instagram feed, and this is just a way to familiarize our community with who we are and what we do. We do introductions of our team so you guys can get to know us better, and also we post quite a bit about the amazing events we get to do, both our educational outreach team and my personal favorite part, our farmers markets, which I will go into that in a minute. I love working at farmers markets. And I've got even a clip of of a bear hanging out that we got from one of our amazing volunteers. So my personal favorite part, I love attending farmers markets. We're actually attending one tomorrow in Pittsfield, which I believe is a 20-minute drive away from here. So we would love for you all to come. We would love to interact with you face to face. And it's really just an opportunity for us to field your questions and learn more about what you all think about your wildlife and how we can help answer those questions. We do include a little bit of trivia just to keep things a little lighthearted, but we love to answer your questions, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow.
We have a farmers market here every Thursday, so.
Good to know. And then moving on to volunteer contributions. Like Thea mentioned earlier, we are a citizen science or a community science project, which means your questions, we love your questions, we love our community, and we want to answer your questions. They are what our research is based around, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You get to ask your questions, and we work to help you guys find answers, and we can't do what we do without you all. This photo up here, I'm quite the city girl, so I really freak out anytime I see bears or whatever. It's like, these are real? Oh my gosh. But this is a photo of a few bears hanging out submitted by one of our amazing volunteers. And I just think it's so cool that we get to see stuff like this every day, and it's possible because of our community. So gathering data as a community is also very beneficial for all those involved. It allows our communities to pursue science far beyond the classroom and scientific inquiry and observation. And as Thea mentioned, as bears continue to return back to areas they had previously inhabited, cohabitation is something that some folks are frightened about, and we feel that engaging our communities in science helps ease that transition and mitigate some fear. It also expands our sources of data. Marie, Ellen, and I, we love to go out in the field, but I'm sure that if we were out in the field every single day this summer, we would only be able to capture a fraction of the data that our volunteers submit to us. We'll take questions at the end, I'm sorry. So what do we do once sightings or photos are submitted to us? We will input any data from cameras, and we use that to create a map of where these animals were sighted, where these mammals specifically were sighted, where in the state, what time of year. And we use this to build models that we will eventually share with all of you. So how can you all get involved? There's two ways that you all could get involved with our project. Incidental sightings, if you just happen to come across a bear or any type of mammal from time to time, we would love for you to send those photos to us or those videos to us. That's a huge deal, and we're really grateful for it. Or if you would like to be a full-time or a more regular volunteer, having fixed cameras, those of you who have trail cameras set up in your backyards or are interested in setting up a trail camera somewhere, we would love for you to scan our QR code if you'd like to be a registered volunteer. And actually should I go back? Okay. I'll wait a sec for anyone who would like to scan our QR code.
We would love that. We love that. You can pull this back up again.
Yes, we'll pull it back up.
But thank you. We're really excited that somebody would want to join us.
So having fixed cameras are actually a great help to us all. For those of you who have trail cameras or would like to set up trail cameras, and a lot of folks don't realize if you have a Nest or a Ring doorbell, those also act as fixed trail cameras, and they're really helpful to us. They allowed us to track both the absence and presence of a species because you're continuously taking photos over time, and it allows us to get a better picture of what's actually going on with our mammals, and it allows us to diversify our models so our information is more accurate. Mammals of interest. Obviously, we do focus quite a bit on bears, but that's not all we're looking for. If you have photos of foxes, coyotes, bobcats, and all of that, we would be very grateful to see those photos. We also, for those of you who would like to engage more closely with us one-on-one, we have just launched our ambassador program, which allows folks like you all to engage more closely with our team. You get to work with our social media, meet our core team members on Zoom, and you get to facilitate community connections as well. Other ways you all can get involved, please meet us at farmers markets. We love our community. We love to interact face to face, get to know everyone better. I also have QR codes for our map and website as well as our monthly newsletter if you all would like to get more information and learn more about what we're doing and what we're up to recently. Interacting with our social media is also a great way to stay up to date with our content. And spreading the word, my personal favorite, word of mouth does so much just for spreading information and just getting our project around. And one way you can do that is through Nextdoor. If your neighborhood uses Nextdoor or a neighborhood listserv, these are forums where folks will post about what's going on in their neighborhood, and often people will use it to talk about wildlife sightings they've seen. And so if someone says, hey, look at this really cool bear I just found, you can say, well, there's this really cool group called MassMammals. They're looking for photos like this. You should consider submitting to them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen, who will speak to you about new directions that we're taking our project in.
So as Zaynah has mentioned, our goal is always to make ecology an inclusive and inviting science by giving people the power to ask their own questions and help answer them. And through our citizen science mindset, we are always mindful of making sure to keep the community's interests in mind when we are doing our own research. And this summer, we are exploring community questions in the Holyoke Range in conversation with local partners such as the Kestrel Land Trust and residents. It has been brought to our attention that due to increased signage and access to the in the range, there's been more mountain biking in the area. And this has led the community to ask what happens to wildlife when there is increased trail usage. And inspired by this question, we first looked at the range, which we're working with. The Holyoke Range is a 7-mile ridge. It has over 30 trails and lots of wildlife. And we started to think about what factors could impact wildlife distribution in the range. We've thought about trail density, canopy cover, and as shown here, housing density, and also microclimate, which is consistent patterns of weather in small areas. And this is relevant to the Holyoke Range because the south side of the mountain has a different microclimate than the north side of the mountain. So when we're out in the field, we're taking measurements of temperature and soil temperature and humidity and canopy cover and other factors of microclimate. And then, of course, most important to our community question, we are seeing how human trail use impacts the Holyoke Range. And human trail use includes hiking, mountain biking, motorized vehicles such as ATVs, and even horseback riding. And then we started to think about how we could start answering this question. And as you can see, we've imposed a grid over the Holyoke Range. And the goal of this is to put a camera at the trail that is closest to the center of each of these squares. So in May, we've been out and we've put out these trail cameras. And now we are in the process of collecting these cameras for the first time and taking the SD cards out and looking at the data we've collected, and also taking the microclimate measurements I talked about earlier. And we've gotten a lot of exciting images like this. We have a bear and we have a deer and we have a bobcat down here. But then we also get a lot of images like this, which you haven't noticed already, there is no animals in them. That's because the motion detectors will detect leaves moving around. And so a lot of our data that we get back just looks like this. And it's a lot of sorting to have to go through the animals that we need and the recreation we need and these. So that's why we're using PyTorch Wildlife, which is an AI software that we have been experimenting with to see if we can separate the images we are going to use for our data from the ones that are just leaves moving around. And we actually tried this today. It was definitely out of my field coding, but it worked very well, and I'm really excited to start using this. And shameless plug, if you want to follow us this summer, we'll be posting reels on Instagram, so you can follow us at MassMammals And I'm going to pass it back to Thea for acknowledgments and questions.
So we have to acknowledge some folks who we work with who have been really supportive of the project, and that our biology department is the department that we come from, the Center for Community Engagement, Center for Teaching and Learning, all at Amherst College support this project. And of course, we also want to say thank you to all of you for coming out to listen to us and for participating in our project. So you all have been an incredible audience and had a lot of enthusiasm. We've already had questions, but what we're going to do is we're going to set things up so that you can use this QR code to type your questions in so that we can then make sure that everybody has a chance to have those questions answered. And then hopefully we'll get a chance to show some of the pictures that you maybe put up on that slide for us. So if you have questions, if you can go ahead and scan that in, and then we'll try to start taking the questions from here and addressing them for you. Okay. What's this?
We're doing some data collection here.
It'll facilitate doing questions rather than trying to reach everybody in the room. It gets a little unwieldy, so we're going to try this. So if you can pose your questions for us, that would be great. Or is that not working? There's no questions, right? Okay. Walking range. I don't know what that means. Yeah, that's not. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that we don't know. Okay, so we have a question about AI and how that works with our trail cameras. And so we're just learning about AI. It's been really interesting for us. We knew that we were going to be getting a ton of photos, and that, as Ellen pointed out, a lot of them would just be from the wind. And so we wanted to figure out a way to deal with that. And the advances in AI are really incredible in that it's going to allow us to help tell the difference with that. And so what we have to do is we go out to the trail cameras and we pull the SD cards that have the pictures, and then we pull the pictures onto our own computer, and then the AI program is able to process the photos, and it goes through the photos. It has an algorithm that allows it to detect the different things that might be present. So it went through, or the folks who were designing it went through quite a bit of training so that the program could then identify the organisms that might show up, so that then when it goes through that process, it's able to spit back out and tell us, oh, there's a human on this slide, or, oh, you didn't get anything on this picture. And so then that has been how we've been using it. But we've been working with the IT department to learn how to do it, because this type of thing is not our area of expertise. But it's going to help us quite a bit in terms of how we are working with our data and being able to quickly turn around results for folks. Sorry. Another one. Okay, so yeah, another question is are we going to expand outside of the Holyoke range in terms of looking at the impact of humans on, or human trail use on the wildlife? And we would love to. We are just barely starting this particular line of investigation, and that we've been looking at the Holyoke range because our own community was saying, hey, like, we're seeing things change. How is this impacting the wildlife? So we're just starting there. We're hoping to work with DCR, so the Department of Conservation and Research. They got really excited about the project when I first mentioned it to them. And so if we are able to develop a positive relationship with them, and there are other communities that are interested in being thoughtful about that, then we would love to come talk to more people about expanding this question in other parts of the state as well. What? Oh, yes. Are photos from a few years ago helpful or just new ones? They're totally still helpful. Please, if you have any from the past, absolutely submit them on our website. We definitely look at data over time. So, yeah, you saw a bear 5 years ago, still tell us that you saw the bear 5 years ago and send us the photo. We are happy to have your data throughout time. So we have, oops. Okay. Should we do the trail camera one? Okay, so somebody asked about what kind of trail camera should you buy. There's lots of different options available, so it depends on your preference. Amazon actually has quite a few different kinds. There's such a range, right? We tend to use Bushnell cameras. They work really well for us. Reconyx cameras are really quite nice, but they tend to be a lot pricier. You can even get the really sophisticated ones that connect to a cell tower, and then you don't even have to go out and check it. It'll actually like send you the pictures back. So there's quite a range of options depending on what your preference is. Like I said, we use the Bushnell cameras, and we just have a lock to attach it to a tree, and we have them all over the Holyoke Range right now and a bunch of other locations as well. And then what were you saying, the upload? Okay, so somebody was asking about uploading bear photos. Super easy. You just need to go to our MassBears website. You can Google that very easily if it's a bear picture, or MassMammals if it's a different mammal, so coyotes, bobcats, whatever else you might be interested in. And then there's a form for you to fill out. And so you will enter some information, and at the end of the form, it gives you an option to add your photo. And so you can just drop your photo in. So nice and straightforward. So it's either MassMammals if you're looking for MassMammals, or MassBears if you are looking to tell us about your bears. Which one? Which one? Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. All right, maybe I'll turn this one to the students. So there's what's the most surprising thing that you've learned so far? Or maybe we could go with most exciting thing that you've learned so far. You're brand new to it, but it might be a fun thing for you all to answer that one. What's that?
I will say, I mentioned this earlier, I'm from New York City. Bears are kind of until I got to Amherst, bears are kind of like that mythical little thing you see on television. You didn't really know they were real. But so just hiking and seeing all these incredible animals, we were looking at our trail cameras, and just an hour before we were out at one of our spots, there was a fox there. There were a couple of deer in the area. Just being able to realize that, wow, these are such majestic creatures, and knowing that all of these are out there and learning what they do, how they live, and how they coexist so close to us has been really amazing for me.
For me, so since I'm mostly part of the educational side, talk about that. I'm from a very rural area, kind of in the south, so I relate to kids from more rural areas not having the best access to science curriculum, or just having that as a career path, not thinking about that. So for me, it's so exciting to get to share the opportunity that I have, because it's a really big privilege going to Amherst College. So the fact that I'm able to share that with kids that I can really relate to being in their community setting is just really fun for me, and I'm really passionate about it.
I'm also on the education team, and I would absolutely say the same thing. I'm from a rural area as well. And I'm always so shocked at how engaged the kids are about learning about science and taking on things that maybe they don't completely understand, but they can work their way to understand it. It's amazing.
Awesome. So somebody also asked if I could so hopefully everybody who's wanted to pose a question has done that, but somebody asked if we could put the QR codes back up. Let's see if we can get back to Zaynah's slides. There we go. And then that way you can get to some of our websites fairly easily from there.
Maybe one more question?
Okay. Is there one more that you want? Okay. All right, so one of the questions is about baiting the traps or the cameras, and I would say no, please don't do that, because again, we still don't want bears to associate anything human with as a food resource. So what you can do is be thoughtful about where you're placing it, right? So you probably are pretty aware of the wildlife that exists in your area. You might know where it passes through. Oftentimes when we're walking around the forest, we'll see an area where it's been worn down. So like a deer trail in the woods, and bears will be likely to use those. So that can be a good spot. Sometimes if you have like a creek that's nearby, you'll see a lot of different animals that might come through there because they're looking for water. So looking for those kinds of things will really help you be able to put your camera in a good location, and then we're not having to worry about any of baiting in that case. So. Thank you.